It required exactly a dozen minutes for Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to comprehend the shattering reality that she had brought a curriculum based on gender theory to a heavyweight championship match concerning brutal economic realities. Looking back, the red flags were blinking the instant she stepped onto that gleaming CNN platform where Senator John Kennedy awaited her with a grin that appeared disarmingly genial, until you recognized it as the precise look a house cat adopts right before depositing a lifeless rodent at your toes. The tangible proof of his readiness was intimidating, as spread out in front of him on the desk was a yellow legal pad entirely obscured by handwritten scribbles alongside a dense pile of typed documents and a coffee cup emblazoned with the slogan, "I Heart Capitalism." It was clearly a prop he had carried from home specifically to make a visual declaration before a solitary word was uttered, and the whole affair was CNN's brainchild marketed as a pivotal town hall showdown regarding the destiny of the American financial system. They desired sparks, so they summoned one warrior from each extreme of the political landscape, with AOC in the blue corner embodying the progressive left's expansive dream of democratic socialism and Kennedy in the red corner standing for traditional fiscal conservatism, presented with a misleadingly sluggish Southern accent. The studio spectators were split perfectly down the center, as half the chairs were occupied by youthful, spirited, progressive activists who had presumably taken leave from various nonprofit roles to applaud their idol, while the other half was comprised of older, weathered conservatives who appeared as though they had been paying federal levies since before AOC was conceived. Positioned between them sat the moderator Jake Tapper, appearing noticeably anxious, as if he intuited the impending catastrophe but was helpless to halt it. Tapper commenced the event with what ought to have been an easy inquiry setting up the subject of inflation, and AOC grabbed the chance, diving instantly into her standard practiced monologue. She spoke with fervor regarding corporate avarice being the fundamental source of all financial troubles, condemning price gouging and sketching a graphic image of billionaires pilfering prosperity from laboring households. She struck every single one of her talking points with rehearsed exactitude, utilizing the specific buzzwords that always performed well in 60-second TikTok snippets and accumulated thousands of zealous retweets from her supporters. The progressive faction of the crowd devoured it, cheering wildly as she concluded her opening declaration, and she looked assured, believing she was triumphing, until Senator Kennedy leaned in, and that amiable feline grin expanded just a millimeter. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez," he started speaking in that syrup-slow Louisiana cadence that makes every phrase sound like it is being offered with a glass of sweet tea on a veranda. "That is all truly fascinating, but before we get too lost in the thicket on this, I wonder if you could assist me with something. See, I am merely a simple country attorney. Well, I am a senator now, but I still think in that manner, and I am having a bit of difficulty tracking your explanation. So could you do me a swift favor and just define inflation for me, simply so we are all operating with the identical comprehension?" AOC blinked, momentarily disoriented by the elementariness of the solicitation, but she recuperated rapidly, reiterating her earlier argument with slightly more stress, stating that inflation is when costs rise due to rampant corporate avarice. Kennedy cut her off very softly, raising a hand, and said, "No, ma'am, see? That is what you believe causes inflation. That is your theory, whereas I am requesting you to define what the word inflation actually signifies. You know the standard economic definition, since you possess an economics degree from Boston University, so I am entirely positive you studied the textbook definition back then." The snare had been laid with expert nuance, and AOC had not even perceived the tripwire yet. But what transpired over the subsequent minutes was fated to become the most viral instance in political debating since the Biden-Palin confrontations years prior. If you believe that depiction is an overstatement, You need to wait until you view the actual receipts, Kennedy brought to the discussion with the excruciating slowness of a carnivore who knows its quarry has nowhere to flee. Kennedy reached toward his mound of papers and withdrew a specific document, handling it with the utmost care, like a barrister submitting crucial damning proof in a capital homicide trial, which, considering his history, made absolute sense. "Representative," he proceeded, clutching the paper with both hands, "you graduated from Boston University with a certification in economics, which is genuinely impressive. And I myself attended Vanderbilt and Oxford. But I admit I still struggle with long division occasionally." The self-effacing jest elicited a sincere chuckle from the crowd, diffusing the strain for a fleeting second, and he continued, "So, I am certain with your vast economics proficiency, you can assist in educating all of us simple people about intricate economic policy, and I am truly looking forward to learning something this evening." He displayed the document so the cameras could acquire a clear view of it, stating, "This right here is your university transcript, well, portions of it anyway. The segments that became public record when you petitioned for that congressional internship back in university, and the Freedom of Information Act, is truly a marvelous thing, is it not?" AOC's assured smile wavered slightly, and her eyes flicked to the paper as Kennedy said, "Now I see here on this record that you took Introduction to Macroeconomics your freshman year, which is a fine start. Then you took Introduction to Microeconomics your sophomore year, and then let us see one upper-level economics elective during your junior year. And that is it, meaning 3 economics courses in total." Kennedy looked up from the page with dramatized bewilderment, furrowing his brow, and remarked, "That seems a little sparse for an economics degree, does it not?" He thumbed through a few more sheets of the file and added, "But I do notice you took an abundance of other captivating courses, such as gender and sexuality in the modern world. And you took intersectionality and social justice and post-colonial theory, which are all riveting subjects, I am sure. But they are not precisely economics, are they?" He withdrew another piece of paper for comparison, stating, "This document enumerates Boston University's actual degree, mandates for an economics major, and students require a minimum of 12 specific economics courses, including econometrics, advanced micro and macro theory, monetary policy, and international economics. You took 3, so your degree is technically in economics and international relations, with a very substantial emphasis on the IR portion," he said, looking back down at her grade report, with his finger tracing a row. "And that Introduction to Microeconomics class, that is the one where you study the absolute fundamentals regarding supply and demand curves, marginal cost, and market equilibrium, the foundational cornerstones of the entire discipline. You received a C+ in that class, ma'am." The conservative section of the chamber began to whisper, while the progressive side appeared suddenly ill at ease, and Kennedy held up a hand, as if to shield her, saying, "Now I am not asserting a C+ is horrific. Heck, I earned a C+ in statistics back at Vanderbilt, and I still managed to graduate, but the distinction is, I do not go around suggesting to completely reconstruct the entire statistical system of the United States of America based on that C+ comprehension, because that would just be absurd." Ocasio-Cortez, now visibly on the defensive, endeavored to reclaim the narrative as she rectified her posture and gazed directly into the lens, attempting to pivot away from her academic history. "Senator," she commenced, "economics is not merely about cold formulas, sterile charts, or ancient textbooks. It is about real humans. It is about comprehending the tribulations of working families and how the current apparatus fails them." Kennedy did not skip a beat, nodding along with her as if they were in total accord, saying, "Oh, I agree with you entirely, ma'am. Economics is absolutely about people specifically. It is about the individuals who lose their occupations and their livelihoods when politicians who earned C+s in basic economics attempt to execute sweeping policies they do not actually grasp. But let us look nearer at your professional economics expertise, because after college, you graduated, and then you became a professional economist, right? He paused, letting the hush hang in the atmosphere for a heavy moment, while AOC remained mute, her jaw set. "Oh, wait, that is correct," Kennedy continued, tapping his temple as if just recalling. "You did not do that. You became a bartender, and now, do not misunderstand me. That is honest labor, and I have a deep reverence for that, as my own daddy owned a small enterprise, and I was reared to believe that honest work is honest work, no matter what it is. But representative tending bar and mixing beverages is not exactly the same thing as laboring at the Federal Reserve, because you did not become an economist. You did not work in the high-stakes realm of finance, and you did not even become a junior accountant. You poured lagers and served cocktails, which necessitates a set of aptitudes like people skills and multitasking, but those are not the capacities required to administer a national economy." Kennedy leaned back in his seat, crossing one leg over the other, appearing entirely relaxed, while AOC looked increasingly like she was seated in an interrogation chamber. "So let us summarize where we are thus far," he said, counting off on his digits. "You took exactly 3 economics courses in college. You received a C+ in the most vital, foundational one. You never worked a single day in the sector of economics or finance in your professional life. And yet, here you are proposing to fundamentally restructure the entire American economy with a plan that costs, by some estimates, $93 trillion. Ma'am, based on those credentials, I would not allow you to restructure my sock drawer, let alone the engine of the free world." The room erupted as one half of the audience broke into thunderous applause and cheers, while the other half shouted in outrage, calling the remark sexist or condescending. Jake Tapper gripped his moderator's desk, trying desperately to restore some semblance of order as the noise level spiked, and AOC's face was now flushed, a deep red. Her teeth clenched as she waited for the noise to die down so she could strike back. She started to open her mouth to respond, but Kennedy was not quite finished with his opening salvo and added, "And just so, we are crystal clear, Representative, I am not making fun of bartenders. I have nothing but respect for the service industry, but what I am making fun of are bartenders who think that the experience of pouring a beer somehow qualifies them to redesign the entire system of global capitalism. There is a massive difference between the two, and the American people deserve to know which one they are getting." Kennedy then pivoted the discussion, saying, "Let us discuss your trip to the Met Gala." He reached into his stack of documents and pulled out several high-quality glossy color photos, saying, "September 2021, you attended the Met Gala wearing a very lovely, very expensive-looking white dress with the words, 'Tax the Rich,' splashed across the back in giant red letters. The dress was designed by Aurora James, a very talented designer, and as we all know, tickets to the Met Gala cost a cool $35,000 each. He held the photos out so the audience and the millions watching at home could see AOC in her gown, surrounded by high society celebrities and flashbulbs. Now you claimed at the time that the ticket was borrowed or gifted to you, and the designer said you were her personal guest, which is fine and wonderful, but here is where my simple country lawyer brain starts to get a little confused because of the Internal Revenue Service. You see, according to the tax code, anything over a certain value, currently $15,000, that is given to an individual has to be reported as income, and more importantly, it has to be taxed. He began to write in large, bold numbers on his pad, turning it so the cameras could broadcast the math to every living room in America, saying, "Let us do some basic arithmetic, starting with the ticket price of $35,000. Then we have that custom-made designer dress, which we can conservatively estimate at somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000. Add in professional hair and makeup, which likely cost several thousand, and the various luxury accessories, and, when you add it all up, we are looking at a total value of roughly $100,000 in free goods and services provided to you for that one single evening. Kennedy looked up from his pad, his eyes locking onto AOC's, and said, "Now, Representative, I have taken the liberty of looking through your financial disclosure forms for the year 2021 as a member of Congress, and I do not see any reporting of these gifts, not a single cent. The tax liability on $100,000 of additional income at your specific tax bracket would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $35,000 to $40,000. So my question is very simple. Did you pay taxes on this $100,000 gift?" Ma'am, to the average American, that does not look like a political protest. That looks like tax evasion with better fashion sense. AOC finally found her voice, though it was higher and more strained than before, countering, "The dress was borrowed for the event and was returned immediately afterward, so it was not a gift in the traditional sense. It was a loan for a professional appearance." Kennedy did not miss a beat, shaking his head slowly, saying, "The $35,000 ticket was not returned, was it? Nor was the professional makeup or the 5-course meal. Even if we talk just about the dress, the IRS does not actually care if you gave it back the next morning because you received the full benefit and utility of wearing an $80,000 custom gown for the evening. And I took the time to talk to some tax attorneys about this, who told me that if an employer or benefactor loans you a high-value item for personal use, the IRS considers that a taxable benefit." Kennedy then shifted gears to Amazon, saying, "Perfect. Let us talk about Amazon because, Representative, you are from New York's 14th District, and you famously helped kill the Amazon HQ2 deal that was slated for Queens. That deal was nothing more than corporate welfare," AOC stated firmly. "We were prepared to hand over $3 billion in public money to the richest man in the world, while our schools and subways are crumbling." "Stop right there," Kennedy said, holding up a palm. "That sentence right there is where we need to have a little teaching moment, because that single statement reveals a fundamental, deep-seated misunderstanding of how economics actually works." He pulled out a detailed breakdown of the Amazon deal, explaining, Amazon was planning to build its second headquarters in Long Island City, Queens, projecting creating between 25,000 and 40,000 jobs over the next decade, with an average salary of $150,000 a year. In exchange, the state and city offered $3 billion in tax incentives over 10 years, but tax incentives are not cash. Representative Ocasio-Cortez genuinely thought and told the public that New York was writing Jeff Bezos a $3 billion check, thinking there was a pile of $3 billion sitting in a bank account somewhere that she could suddenly spend on schools or subways once the deal was dead. A tax incentive means Amazon would have paid less in taxes than they otherwise would have, Kennedy explained, with the patient, slightly disappointed tone of a professor dealing with a student who hadn't read the syllabus. If Amazon does not come to New York, then New York gets zero tax dollars from Amazon, whereas if Amazon comes to New York with incentives, New York gets some tax dollars, just not as much as they would have without the incentives, and as anyone who finished middle school knows, some is significantly more than zero. He held up an economic analysis stating, economists found that Amazon would have generated approximately $27 billion in new tax revenue for the state and city over 10 years. So the incentives would have cost $3 billion in uncollected potential revenue, meaning a net benefit of $24 billion. That is $24 billion that could have gone to those schools and subways you mentioned, but instead, you got nothing. You killed 92,000 potential jobs, including indirect ones, because you thought tax incentives were actual liquid cash. You celebrated saving $3 billion that did not exist while simultaneously losing $24 billion that would have existed. Kennedy reached into his stack and produced a relatively thin document, barely 14 pages long, saying, "Representative Ocasio-Cortez, this is your signature legislation, the Green New Deal," and I read the whole thing, all 14 pages of it. It took me about 8 minutes, to be honest, and I have read Chinese food menus that were more detailed and better thought out. He began flipping through the pages, which were heavily marked with yellow highlighter and red ink, noting, "This document is quite the masterpiece of imagination, as it promises to make America carbon neutral. In just 10 years, guarantees a high-paying job for every single person who wants one, promises universal health care, free college for all, and the retrofitting or total rebuilding of every single building in the United States." But what I found most fascinating about this document is not what is in it, but what is missing, which is a cost estimate. I asked some real economists to estimate what this wish list would actually cost the American taxpayer, and the American Action Forum estimated it would cost roughly $93 trillion over the first 10 years. Let us be generous and call it $70 trillion, which is $7 trillion per year. Yet the entire federal revenue for 2022 was about $4.4 trillion. So your plan costs significantly more per year than the entire United States government actually collects. Kennedy then dismantled the logistics, saying, "Your plan promises to retrofit or rebuild every building in America in 10 years, and there are approximately 136 million buildings in this country. That means your plan requires us to retrofit or rebuild 37,000 buildings every single day, including weekends and holidays, for 10 years straight. Ma'am, there are not enough construction workers in America to do that, nor enough raw materials on the planet. You also promised to eliminate air travel and replace it with high-speed rail, but the distance from New York to Los Angeles is 2,800 miles. Even the fastest high-speed rail in the world in China tops out around 200 miles per hour, meaning that is a 14-hour train ride, and nobody is going to choose a 14-hour train ride over a 5-hour flight." He pointed to the rail requirements, saying, "To build the 30,000 miles of rail your plan requires. In 10 years, we would have to lay 8 miles of track every single day. China, with an authoritarian government and zero environmental reviews, only manages about 1,000 miles per year. So do you honestly think America is going to build 3 times faster while dealing with union labor and environmental impact statements? This is not a policy proposal. Representative, this is a children's letter to Santa Claus. You have promised every toy in the store, but you have not explained how Santa is going to manufacture them or who is paying for the workshop." Kennedy paused to take a sip from his mug before pivoting to her personal finances, saying, "Representative, you talk a lot about income inequality, and you speak passionately about how the rich are getting richer while working people are struggling. I would like to talk about your personal wealth for a moment, because when you were first elected in 2018, you had about $15,000 in total savings. But let us look at your life now. Representative, what kind of car do you drive? It is a Tesla, isn't it, specifically a Model 3, which with the features visible in these photos probably cost closer to $50,000. My question is simple. How did a working-class hero afford a $50,000 luxury electric vehicle so quickly? I make a congressional salary, AOC replied sharply. I work hard for that income. You certainly do make a congressional salary of $174,000 a year, which puts you comfortably in the top 10% of all American earners. Kennedy began scribbling on his legal pad again, saying, You maintain an apartment in Washington, D.C. in the Navy Yard neighborhood where rent runs between $3,000 and $4,000 a month, plus a residence in New York, plus frequent travel and designer clothes. When I add up your likely required expenses, you are looking at $8,000 to $10,000 a month in lifestyle costs. Then you have your taxes, so if we do the math out of your salary, you are spending about $160,000 on your lifestyle and tax obligations, leaving maybe $14,000 a year for savings. And yet, you went from $15,000 in total savings to owning a $50,000 luxury car in just a few years. So where did the extra money come from? The math only adds up if we look at your other income streams like book deals and speaking fees. You wrote a book about being working class while making $174,000 a year, which is quite the hustle. He leaned back, spreading his arms wide, stating, "Here is my point. Representative, you make more money than 90% of the people in this country. You drive a luxury electric car and live in expensive, exclusive neighborhoods. You cannot be rich and pretend you are poor, nor can you drive a $50,000 car and claim to be the voice of the people riding the city bus. That isn't representation, ma'am. That's false advertising." Senator Kennedy took a long, measured pause, adjusting his glasses as the atmosphere in the room shifted. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez, let us talk about your grandmother, because this one is a bit more personal and speaks to the heart of how you view the people you claim to represent. After Hurricane Maria, you spoke emotionally about your grandmother living in squalid conditions in Puerto Rico with a leaking roof and no power, blaming the Trump administration entirely. Matt Walsh organized a GoFundMe campaign, and within hours, regular Americans donated over $100,000 specifically for your grandmother to fix her roof. And you know what you did. You refused the money, calling the fundraiser a stunt, and turning away $100,000 in actual tangible aid simply because the money came from the wrong political team. But here is the real kicker, Representative, because reporters actually went to Puerto Rico to check on your grandmother, and they found the house was fine, and the repairs had been completed long ago. Your grandmother was living comfortably, and even told the reporters she was doing okay. You told the country she was suffering to score political points, and when people offered actual money to fix the problem you claimed existed, you rejected it because accepting it would have ruined your narrative. That isn't advocacy, Representative, that is exploitation, as you used your own grandmother's life as a political prop. You chose the narrative over the truth, and tonight, the receipts have finally caught up with you. Representative, where exactly do you live when you are working for the people in Washington, D.C.? It is a brand-new luxury development in the Navy Yard built in 2018, featuring a rooftop pool, a state-of-the-art fitness center, and full concierge service. Rent for a one-bedroom in your building runs between $3,000 and $4,000. But here is what is interesting. Representative, this building is exactly the kind of luxury development that you have spent your entire career opposing in your own district in Queens. You have stood on street corners telling your constituents that buildings like this are instruments of gentrification. Yet, the moment you got a taste of that congressional salary, you moved into one yourself. So my question is, are luxury apartments only immoral when they are being built in Queens? Or do they suddenly become essential when they have a rooftop pool that you want to use? Finally, let us talk about small businesses, the backbone of the American economy. You claim to support them, but your voting record tells a completely different story. Since you entered Congress, there have been 17 major bills specifically designed to provide relief to small businesses, and you voted for exactly 2 of them, which is an 11% support rate. You voted no on tax relief for businesses with fewer than 50 employees, And you voted no on the Paycheck Protection Program, which kept millions employed. During the pandemic, your district lost 3,400 small businesses permanently, while big chains like Target and Amazon thrived. You supported the lockdowns that killed local shops and opposed the relief bills that would have saved them. You have never run a business representative. You have never hired a single soul nor sat up at 3 a.m. wondering how to make payroll. But you sit in that air-conditioned office in D.C. and vote to make life harder for the people who actually do those things. Your father was a small business owner who knew the risk and sacrifice, yet his daughter grew up to become the greatest threat to small business in the United States Congress. You have never created a job, you have never made anything except speeches, but you have used your power to crush the people who actually build this country. Representative, the working class does not work for billionaires in ivory towers. They work for the small businesses on Main Street, and you are putting them out of business one vote at a time.